What is up? Welcome back to another edition of Spooky Stories in Grocknation. Hopefully you guys will join me next to this haunted cabin in this forest and may or may not be put to sleep with the beautiful haunting ambience that it provides. I hope everybody had a great and fun, safe Halloween this year. Your decorations scared all the kitties. Maybe you got all the candy you wanted to get if you're one of my younger viewers. In the spirit of Halloween, tonight we are going to be discussing one of Halloween's biggest mascots, and an actual real thing in this world, which is witches, or a witch. In the famous colonial trials of Salem, Massachusetts, that involved 25 people losing their lives in witch hysteria. We'll be looking at that story as well. We'll be looking at a family terrorized by a demon in Brownsville, Pennsylvania, that garnered national attention, if not statewide attention in Pennsylvania, as a prominent political figure was at the heart of it all, and there were headlines in papers with these disturbances happening. We'll be looking at that story as well, you guys. Before we get started, guys, once again, if you're new to the channel and you like the video, give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you get notifications for future videos, especially if you're new to the channel and this is your sort of thing. This is a series of videos we have done, and you can check out all the previous videos we've done before, just right up there. Click that link, and yeah, we've done a ton here. This has actually been going on from the very beginning of my channel, which leads me to this next little prelude to the video, if you will. My very first spooky stories I did was on personal spooky stories. My run-ins with the supernatural personally. One of the stories I have an update on, which I saved for this video because I haven't talked to you guys about this yet. So I talked about the story of seeing that smoke in my aunt's haunted house that pulled the cassette off the top of the fridge while I was laying in the living room. You guys can see that in my very first personal spooky stories, the very first video I talk about this. Well, this past summer, I spent a road trip with my cousin Joy, who lived in that house. And what a shocker. We actually brought up this story, I did, of that haunted house they lived in. And while I was moved away to Edmonton and he was living there alone still, something happened that I never heard of until just this past summer when I did this road trip with him. He told me that he was in the house alone, and that all the contents on top of the fridge, everything, it was a packed fridge, came flying off of the fridge while he was home alone, and it scared the shit out of him. He left the house. This happened on a Sunday, and in that hovel there's church every Sunday, and my grandmother and his mother happened to be at church. So after the incident, my grandmother came over to the house and they discussed what had happened, and my grandmother actually got a hold of the priest who was still in town, and he came and he blessed the house. But this is a story I had never heard before, and it coincides with my seeing something on top of that fridge and pulling a cassette off, so that's a really creepy addition to that story. Again, guys, if you want to see that story, you're going to have to click on a link up there. I'll post the link for you guys because it really is a very creepy collection of stories I've accumulated personally in my life, and it's not even the end of it. Obviously, our last Spooky Stories video had a run-in with, I'm not sure what it was in Amsterdam, but you guys can go back and look at that as well. So, let's get started with our first part of the video, which is the witch. Those of us that are unfamiliar with the term witch, it is the term used mostly for people delving into the paranormal, conjuring into the dark arts, conjuring spirits, good or evil. There are good witches and there are bad witches. The bad ones get all of the attention, obviously, not just in cinema, but in paranormal as well. In the world, the real world, there are witches in every culture and in every race. You know, you have voodoo priestesses; those are witches. I'm Native American. I've always known of medicine men, and there are good medicine men and bad medicine men. It's the same thing. It's conjuring up something from the other side to do your bidding, if you will, but there's a price to be paid, and it usually is eternal damnation. Your soul is given for these privileges. So, with that being said, the only story I know personally of myself in my life that pertains to witches would be with a medicine man. And I remember my aunt when I was a kid, she would have been in her mid-20s, she actually got into a fight with another girl. And that girl's dad is a medicine man that reportedly did bad medicine as well as good. But he had threatened to make her face turn upside down, is what the daughter had told my aunt when during their fight. My dad's gonna use bad medicine to make your face turn upside down, whatever the hell that means. What I do remember, and this is where it gets creepy, is my aunt actually had to go to the hospital that evening as the eyes in her head wouldn't stop rolling backwards. I don't know if she came into contact with anything physical. As you guys know, I am a realist, and if it was some kind of a poisoning, I could rationalize it that way. I don't know how this worked exactly, but I do remember being in the emergency room with her, and that was the situation. Her eyes wouldn't stop rolling to the back of her head, and she couldn't sleep, and it was very painful for her. And I always remember that. In terms of like bad medicine, a witch, a voodoo priestess, whatever it may be, I will always remember that story. What we're going to be looking at here is probably the most famous American story in terms of witch hysteria, which happened during the colonial era. A lot of it is with the Puritans, the Puritan religion, this witch hysteria that happened around that time. Very, very religious, superstitious paranoia, and this is where a lot of this took place. So we're going to be looking at this story, and I'm going to be reading articles for both these stories, you guys. The Brownsville Demon, I'll actually discuss my review on the book, what I think of it, but we will be reading articles pertaining to these, and it's going to be a lot of reading. So hopefully you guys are looking forward to this and discovering this with me. So yeah, guys, we're going to get digging into it here. The witch story. Put your headphones on, sit back, relax. If this is something you're going to sleep to, if it's something for background noise, get ready. I will have some picture slideshows like I usually do in these stories for your visual pleasure if you are going to be just watching as well. So with that being said, let's get into this. We're going to be discussing the Salem witch trials in Boston, Massachusetts. So yeah, there's your first visual of the evening. Oh, that's a creepy one. I actually find a lot of these on online on DeviantArt is where, if you guys are curious. So, the Salem witch trials occurred in colonial Massachusetts between early 1692 and mid-1693. More than 200 people were accused of practicing witchcraft, the devil's magic, and 20 were executed. In 1711, colonial authorities pardoned some of the accused and compensated their families. July 2022, Elizabeth Johnson Jr., the last convicted Salem witch, whose name had yet to be cleared, was officially exonerated. Since the 17th century, the story of the trials has become synonymous with paranoia and injustice, fueled by xenophobia, religious extremism, long-brewing social tensions. The witch hunt continues to beguile the population imagination more than 300 years later. In the medieval and early modern eras, many religions, including Christianity, thought that the devil could give people known as witches the power to harm others in return for their loyalty. A witchcraft craze rippled through Europe in the 1300s to the end of the 1600s. Tens of thousands of supposed witches, mostly women, were executed. Though the Salem trials took place just as the European craze was winding down, local circumstances explained their onset. In 1689, English monarchs William and Mary started a war with France and the American colonials. Colonies known as King William's War, the colonists. The conflict ravaged regions of upstate New York, Nova Scotia, Quebec, sending refugees to the county of Essex and specifically Salem Village in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Salem Village is present-day Danvers, Massachusetts. Colonial Salem town became what's now Salem. The dispatched people placed a strain on Salem's resources, aggravating the existing rivalry between families with ties to the wealth port of Salem and those who still depend on agriculture. Controversy also brewed over the Reverend Samuel Barris, who became Salem's first official ordained minister in 1689 and quickly gained a reputation for his rigid ways and greedy nature. The Puritan villagers believed all the quarreling was the work of the devil. In January 1692, Barris's daughter Elizabeth, or Betty, age 9, and niece Abigail Williams, age 11, started having fits. They screamed, threw things, uttered peculiar sounds, and contorted themselves into strange positions. A local doctor blamed the supernatural. Another girl, 12-year-old Anne Putman Jr., experienced similar episodes. On February 29th, under pressure from the magistrates Jonathan Corwin and John Hawthorne, colonial officials who tried local cases, the girls blamed 3 women for afflicting them. Tituba, a Caribbean woman enslaved by the Barris family. Sarah Good, a homeless beggar, and Sarah Osborne, an elderly impoverished woman. All 3 women were brought before the local magistrates and interrogated for several days, starting on March 1st, 1692. Osborne claimed innocence, as did Good, but Tituba confessed. "The devil came to me and bid me serve him." She described elaborate images of black dogs, red cats, yellow birds, and a tall man with white hair who wanted her to sign his book. She admitted that she'd signed the book and claimed that there were several other witches looking to destroy the Puritans. With the seeds of paranormal planted, a stream of accusations followed over the next few months. Charges against Martha Corey, a loyal member of the church in Salem Village, greatly concerned the community. If she could be a witch, then anybody could. Magistrates even questioned Good's 4-year-old daughter, Dorothy, whose timid answers were construed as a confession. The questioning got more serious in April as the colony's deputy governor, Thomas Danforth, and his assistants attended the hearings. Dozens of people from Salem and other Massachusetts villages were brought in for questioning. On May 27, 1692, Governor William Phelps ordered the establishment of a special court of oyer to hear and terminer to decide the Suffolk, Essex, and Middlesex counties. The first accused witch brought in front of the special court was Bridget Bishop, an older woman known for her gossipy habits and promiscuity. One
asked if she committed witchcraft, Bishop responded, "I am as innocent as the child unborn." The defense must not have been convincing because she was found guilty, and on June 10th became the first person hanged on what was later called Gallows Hill. Just a few days after the court was established, respected Minister Cotton Mather wrote a letter imploring the government to allow spectral evidence testimony about dreams and visions. The court largely ignored this request, sentencing the hangings of 5 people in July, 5 more in August, and 8 in September. On October 3rd, following in his son Cotton's footsteps, increased Mather, then president of Harvard, denounced the use of spectral evidence. There were better than 10 suspected witches should escape than one innocent person be condemned. Phipps, in response to these pleas and his own wife's questioning as a suspected witch, prohibited further arrests and released many accused witches. He dissolved the Court of Oyer in Terminer on October 29th, replacing it with a special court of judicature, which disallowed spectral evidence and condemned just 3 out of 56 defendants. By May 1693, Phipps had pardoned all those imprisoned on witchcraft charges, but the damage was already done. 19-minute woman had been hanged on Gallows Hill. Gil's Corey, Martha's 71-year-old husband, was pressed to death in September 1692 with heavy stones after refusing to submit himself to trial. At least 5 of the accused died in jail. Even animals fell victim to the mass hysteria, with colonists in Andover and Salem Village killing 2 dogs, believed to be linked to the devil. In the years following the executions, some involved, including Judge Samuel Sewell and accuser Ann Budman, publicly confessed error in guilt. On January 14, 1697, Massachusetts General Court ordered a day of fasting and soul-searching over the tragedy of Salem. In 1702, the court declared the trials unlawful, and in 1711, the colonial passed a bill restoring the rights and good names of many of the accused, as well as granting a total of £600 in restitution to their heirs. But it wasn't until 1957, more than 250 years later, that Massachusetts formally apologized for the events of 1692. Johnson, the accused woman, exonerated in July 2022, was left out of the 1957 resolution for reasons unknown, but received an official pardon after a successful lobbying campaign by a class of 8th grade civic students. Yeah, so that is the famous witch trials of Salem, Massachusetts.
So yeah, as I said earlier, there are witches in this world, good or bad. There are witches, and people that practice in this kind of magic, this dark magic, this otherworldly magic, if you will. This story is just an example of that mass paranoia and that suspicion when in the colonial years, especially during those Puritan years, where everything was super, super, super religious. You had to be religious, basically to not fit in, but really, like, live a life, a normal life in colonial United States. Or you'd be looked at as an outcast, and you just would not be welcomed in these communities. And it was religious extremism to its finest, which is what the Puritan religion was at the time. And you know, we think about this, or we talk about this more times than maybe you guys realize, because, you know, burning witches, you know, the burner at the cross like a witch, all these kind of little things we say and whatnot, in jest and as joking to one another. You know, it stems back to these colonial years and this mass paranoia and craziness with the devil and witchcraft. And yeah, it comes down to that. Like I said, there are, you know, all sorts of different kind of witches in this world, not just the bad kind either. The Wiccan religion, for example, which a friend of mine is, she's a Wiccan. Her and her family is not an evil bad devil worshipping witch religion. They worship more like elemental spirits and the earth and the energies of the earth and all this kind of things. That's what their witchcraft, I guess you could say, is. You know, famous heavy metal band Godsmack, most of them are Wiccans as well, just for an example. But like I said, there are in all cultures and all races, there are people that delve in this kind of thing. Like I said, medicine men, voodoo, priests, you know, witches, everything. They're there. But yeah, I figured it would be a proper time to bring it up right on the day after Halloween. I guess a couple days after Halloween, Halloween season, let's just say. Okay, but with that, guys, we're going to be moving on to our next part of this Spooky Stories edition, which is the haunting of Brownsville, Pennsylvania, or the haunting of Brownsville Road. You guys, if you don't know about this, this is going to be your introduction to this story, but this is actually going to be made into a movie from New Line Cinema, much in the same style as the Conjuring universe and Insidious and whatnot, because it's based on a true story. I read this book, listened to it on an audiobook over the last 3 months, and it's a very, very interesting story in that I think the guy that's the head of the family that's telling the story is credible. He's a credible politician, a known politician. People that live in Pennsylvania or that part of the United States definitely would have heard of this at some point. As it made headlines, some of these outbursts and incidents this guy had with his family, that it was a result of a demon infestation that, you know, he kind of figured he pinpointed as to where it came from in the end, but I don't want to give you guys any spoilers. We're actually going to read an article about a guy reviewing this entire book, and I'm going to compare my notes to his in the end, my review of the book itself as well, and maybe some little things that he missed that I found out afterwards you don't really get from the book, and maybe this guy didn't hear about it as well, so we'll look at that. But yeah, with that being said, guys, let's get into this. This is going to be the Brownsville Road Demon, which like I said, I'll read this article and we'll go from there. But again, guys, it's going to be a long read, so sit back, relax, put the headphones on, and yeah, let's get into this. I hope you guys enjoy this. I think you will. Once again, we got some creepy ass art. This is actually the inside of the house. Bob Kramer's house, which is the guy that this haunting happens to. Okay, like I said, this is quite a read, you guys, so bear with me. A time-tested Hollywood formula for success is to find a harrowing story of a demon-possessed house, adapt it into a film, release it as based on a true story, and watch the money roll in. The Demon of Brownsville Road, detailing the harrowing true story of the evil presence that tormented author Bob Kramer and his family, is said to join movies such as The Amityville Horror and Conjuring, receiving Hollywood treatment, as New Line Cinema has hired a writer to adapt the 2014 novel into a movie. Bob Kramer, a former Allegheny County Commissioner, bought the house at 3406 Brownsville Road in October 1988. For the next 18 years, Kramer claims he and his family heard unexplained sounds and witnessed objects moving on their own and walls bleed. They both claim to have been psychologically and physically assaulted by a demonic entity in 2006, when a Catholic Diocese of Pittsburgh worked with the Kramers to perform an exorcism on the house, freeing it of a demon infestation. 5 years later, the Discovery Channel aired a documentary about the exorcism, and Kramer would go on to co-author The Demon of Brownsville Road with Erica Manfred. That's Bob Kramer right there, if you guys don't know. The infamous staircase you guys will hear about. According to Bob Kramer, the Kramers bought the house from a John McHenry and his wife, an alias used in a novel, and moved in on December 12, 1988. I checked the website Realtor.com and verified the last day to sale, knowing that Bob Kramer is still the current owner,
was listed as 12/13/1988. Kramer states that for years we would experience things like all the lights being turned on in the basement when we got up in the morning and when we went downstairs to check the wood burner. Occasionally the radio would be turned on and playing in the workshop area. The children would tell us they would hear walking and knocking outside of the bedroom doors in the hallway, and that it would wake them up in the middle of the night. I don't have an explanation for all these phenomena about Kramer alleges he and his family witnessed in their home, as most of what is recounted in the book is based on subjective experience without corroboration. Since the exorcism in 2006, Kramer says the house is entirely safe and clear, so I doubt any kind of investigation this time would be informative. Additionally, the house has since been converted into a bed and breakfast, as it would be difficult to control the necessary variables for a proper investigation. However, there are several claims that Kramer makes his book that he provides photographic evidence in support of, as well as verifiable historical claims, both of which I was able to investigate and I believe can shed some light on. Kramer claimed to have spoken to a woman named Barbara Paisley, whose parents, Walter and Margaret Wagner, owned the home from 1941 to 1979. In the book, Kramer claims he asked Miss Paisley if she or her family experienced anything spiritual in the house, and alleges that she replied, "Oh yes, many times." However, according to Barbara Paisley's daughter, Ken Dwyer, other than the squirrels in the walls, I never experienced anything there. My mother never said anything about the house being haunted. My grandmother never said anything about the house being haunted. And my grandfather never said anything about the house being haunted. If he wants to go and write it from 1988 and go forward, do it. I don't care. But if you want to lie about other people and things that happened before that, well, no, that's not right. Kramer alleges that Barbara Paisley told him about their dog, who seemed to be able to sense the presence of a spirit and go from room to room apparently looking for it. Curiously, Karen Dwyer said of this, "That's interesting because we never had a dog and my parents didn't like to have pets." With the help of a priest named Father Ron Langwin and a Catholic intuitive, i.e. a psychic named Connie Valenti, Kramer claims to have discovered a dark history that explains demonic activity within this home. First, according to Miss Valenti, the home was the site of an attack by angry Native Americans. I see the spirits. I see one in particular with a big knife. There was a massacre of a mother and her 3 children by Native Americans who were angry at their land being invaded by settlers. The husband wasn't there when it occurred. Kramer claims to have found a letter in the archives of the U.S. Department dated March 13, 1792, from the commander of Fort Pitt, Isaac, to then the Secretary of War, Henry Knox, in which he informed that the Indians had killed his wife and 3 children of Deliverance Brown, having escaped by being some distance from the house. This seemed to Kramer to confirm the psychic's vision. I was able to find a similarly worded letter from the Freeman's Journal on North American Intelligence dated April 17, 1792, which states, "We have the following intelligence by a party of a man from Muskingum, that at a small station between Blair and Belleville on the west side of Ohio, the Indians killed the wife and 3 children of one Deliverance Brown, who being some distance from the house with a son, was able to escape." This confirms that such event did take place. However, based on either this letter or the letter that Bob Kramer refers to, there's no way to determine the exact location of the house Deliverance Brown. Despite several review studies, such as the case of recognition and direct contacts with past and future recognition and precognition, recognition is not accepted as a valid phenomena in the scientific community. Wanting to find the exact letter Bob Kramer claimed to have found, I searched through National Archives and a website, but could not find any such letter. Next, I turned to Historic Pittsburgh, hosted by the University of Pittsburgh's library system. Historic Pittsburgh has a collection of the letters and Greg Naval family dating 1773 to 1865. Therefore, if such a letter existed, this were probably the best place to look. David Bitt of Historic Pittsburgh determined the letters most likely was part of the collection at the Heinz History Center and forwarded my request to them. Unfortunately, Liz from the History Center replied, "I looked through the Greg Naval collection and could not find that letter. To be on the safe side, Mary Joseph, chief librarian, also looked and the result was the same. maybe there's a reason to be skeptical. Naturally, I also asked Mr. Cranmer if he had a copy of the letter, or could point me in the direction of obtaining it. However, he has not yet responded to my inquiry. If such a letter from Isaac Craig to Henry Knox exists, its location remains a mystery. In addition to the claim that the house at 3406 Brownsville Road was built over 100 years ago, over the site of a Native American massacre, psychic Connie Valente also claimed to have visions revealing the house was once used by Dr. M, rumored to have performed illegal abortions in the 1920s and 1930s. Cranmer claims in his book that he hired a historical specialist to research this Dr. M and discovered that he was a pediatrician who started practice around 1915 and was described by a local businessman as a very rough, profane old man who liked to drink and always smelled of it. He walked with a limp and always wore a black hat, white gloves, and he carried a cane. Although the real identity of Dr. M is never given in a book since its publication in 2014, Bob Cranmer has admitted that the infamous Dr. M was really Dr. James Merton Clay Mahan, born about 1890 in Creekside, Pennsylvania. Dr. Mahan appears on page 147 of the University of Pittsburgh's Alumni Directory, Volume 2, dating 1787 and 1916, confirming his medical background. Additionally, with the help of my friend Kenny Biddle, we were able to find a registration dated April 25th, 1942, which not only confirms Dr. Miller's full name, his place of birth. The date is given as January 16, 1890. His status as medical doctor, but also the fact that he walked with a cane. Given the portrayal of Dr. Mahan in the book, one would hope that Cranmer, Lenwing, and Valente had evidence to support their allegations that he was responsible for the Demon of Brownsville Road. When asked in an interview about this, Langwing replied, "I don't need to verify nor to tell the story, and that since Dr. Mahan was never named directly in a book, we didn't accuse anyone of anything." Connie Valente stated in an interview that as far as her visions go, the story is all true and that I can only tell you what he saw. For his part, Bob Cranmer refused to discuss Dr. Mahan at all, claiming, "Well, I didn't identify him in a book, so I'm not going to discuss him." Unfortunately for Cranmer, it turns out Dr. Mahan actually has some living relatives who, much like Karen Dwyer, take umbrage with his portrayal. Dean Mahan, grandson of Dr. Mahan, argues that his grandfather couldn't have been performing abortions in a house at 3406 Brownsville Road in 1920s, 1930s because my grandfather wasn't even there on Brownsville Road then. Consensus records from 1920 to 1940 both confirm this, showing Dr. Mahan was living 2400 Berg Street at the time. According to Dean, his grandfather didn't move to Brentwood, which according to his death certificate was 3233 Brownsville Road, until sometime in the 1940s. Following a scandal and subsequent divorce filing, there is no mention of malpractice suits or back alley abortions. Unlike other cases I've investigated where both author and publisher maintain their book is true and accurate, reported the events described. Photographic evidence is offered in the case of the Demon of Brownsville Road. I focus on two photographs in particular as I would judge them to be the best evidence in support of Bob Cranmer's story. Both are black and white and rather poor quality, so unfortunately there's not much of detail. First is a photograph of blood which allegedly appeared on the walls of the third floor. He describes the scene. All the walls, including two doors, were splattered with large drops of red blood from the ceiling to the floor. The blood was still wet and running down the halls. It was as if someone had just taken a container and a sponge and sprinkled the walls, as Father Mike had done numerous times with holy water. Over the next several weeks, the blood continued to be sprinkled down both staircases to the first floor, including my den. Some of the areas where the blood was dripping from were so far up, 9 feet, that a person would have to use a ladder to get there. Another interesting aspect was it was only on the walls and not in the ceiling. So if it were thrown up there, it would have been impossible to miss hitting the ceilings. It looked as if the walls were bleeding. That's a lot of blood, but sadly the photograph only shows 2 or 3 spots, with Cranmer offering with the camera flash masked the dramatic images to a degree. Unfortunately, this This was such a degree that, in the words of Diego Gasparena, a forensic expert, from a blood spatter perspective, the image is quite poor quality for analysis. Something both Diego and I found interesting was the metal stain started at an angle and became vertical. One would expect that gravity, exerting a pull on an otherwise flat surface, would cause the drip to either go straight down or follow the texture of the surface, for example. For example, the grain of the wood, or because it's an older house, possibly uneven texture of the wall if it were crumbling plaster and lath. Additionally, inside the house were a veritable bloodbath. As described, one might expect more than a single poor quality photograph. The other photograph included in the book was an alleged four-person gravesite in Cranmer's yard. Cranmer hired ground-penetrating radar systems to scan the yard based on psychic visions of Connie. I asked Mr. Cranmer about the GPR findings, and he explained what the text showed me were 4 images on a screen that he said were buried 4 to 6 feet deep, all lying horizontally. There may have been a printed report, and I may have it in the files, but this service is generally used by construction or service people wanting to know that, where, how deep something is buried. He told me that the site, in keeping with all the attributes of a grave. When I asked Mr. Cranmer if he had a copy of the report he'd be willing to share, he responded, "I appreciate your interest, JD, but I have so many files I don't have any motivation to dig through them." In the book, one of the photographs of the scan of the alleged gravesite includes Jacob Lamont, the project manager at the time from GPR. I emailed GPR to see if anyone would discuss the project. However, Mr. Lamont has since left GPR, and I was told Mr. Cranmer would have to grant permission for any official disclosure. Next, I tried reaching out to Jacob Lamont on LinkedIn, but received no response. Finally, I reached out to Kenneth Vedder, professor of archaeology, to see if he had any insight in technology of the process of using ground-penetrating radar. I shared with him what Bob Cranmer had shown me, and Vedder passed my questions and information on to Lawrence Kenver's anthropologist who literally wrote the book on ground-penetrating radar. Unfortunately, having not seen any of the GPR results, Kenver's response, this tells me nothing of importance. Although that firm that did GPR is a large group who mostly makes money finding pipes and such. If they had an image, it would really help, or even some raw data that I can process. I suspect they are pretty good at finding anomalies in the ground, but it usually takes a little more to interpret them, like they have stated in the report. Something that Vedder conveys and I agree upon was that it was curious that Mr. Cranmer wouldn't disclose the report publicly. One would expect that, considering Cranmer had used this report to bolster his claims both in a published book and in advertising his businesses, he would be more than happy to display to the public. To be clear, I'm not claiming that there is no gravesite on Cranmer's property. However, without producing evidence in support of his claims, I'll say he isn't entitled to make them in the first place. In addition to radar analysis, Cranmer used an old dowsing technique for finding burial objects that I saw on the History Channel. I held 2 copper rods and walked around until they moved, indicating the grave was at the oak tree. Dowsing, despite its enduring popularity, has never been scientifically validated to work. Decades of tests, some of which were conducted by the late James the Amazing Randi, have time and time again demonstrated that under controlled conditions, dowsers do not perform any better by chance. Whatever might have happened to Bob Craner and his family during the 18 years in which they were allegedly tormented by a demonic entity, they have my sympathies. As I previously stated, while demons and demonic activity may or may not exist, assuredly depression, anxiety, and suicidal tendencies are very, very serious. While I understand that plenty of people find sense in the comfort of religion and applying religious interpretation to their experiences, I am also concerned that believing oneself to be a victim of supernatural or demonic forces may in some cases make the situation worse. Regardless, people who believe in demons or devils will probably continue to seek diabolical explanations for the unexplained, whether it's finding a greater meaning in one's misfortunes or simply scarfing up a prophet. The devil gets all the blame, but none of the credit.
So that article was written by a skeptic who reviews paranormal claims, everything from the Warren files to anything that pertains to paranormal investigations, whether it be movies based on true stories or just famous articles or books such as this. Now, I guess this guy really didn't touch much on the contents of the book. The contents of the book basically is Bob and Barbara Cranmer had bought this house in 1989, I think it was. I can't remember the exact date. I think it was 89 or 88. They raised their kids there, and there's certain rooms in this house that had this negative energy. I think it was his second oldest son, as a little boy, was trapped in what he calls the blue room, which was the upstairs room. And he really started to delve as he became a teenager into a deep dark. He got extremely violent. He'd have these outbursts. He started dressing differently, blowing school. In one case, he actually had a physical altercation with Bob, while Bob was a member of, I can't remember if he was the mayor of, he's a big political figure in Brownsville, and it was all over the papers. And Bob was actually charged for assault on a minor because he had to physically restrain him. He said his son had the voice of like a monster, and he had supernatural power. That he was a teenager, but he was overpowering Bob, and Bob had to overpower him, pin him down. And the wife broke them up. The wife called the police. He almost lost his marriage over it. He lost his job. It came out in the papers that they didn't mention that it was some supernatural forces. They said that his son was bipolar, and it was a bipolar incident. They had the house blessed many, many times. Obviously, the root of all this was from a mix of the abortion doctor, Dr. M, and as well as the massacre of the woman and her children from the Native Americans during the colonial era, in which they were buried in the tree of that house, the great big tree. There's a whole bunch of nice little spooky stories in here that, like I said, are very similar to investigations and paranormal stories I've heard before that I believe to be true. I don't see a guy like Bob big into the political scene buying an old colonial house, and the whole purpose of buying it is to fabricate this entire possession in his house or infestation of these demonic forces. It just doesn't make sense. The guy's got a career as a politician and everything else. Like, it just seems silly that would be his reasoning. He also talks about in the book how the house called out to him even when he was a kid. Like, he always wanted that house. It was his dream house from the time he was a little boy. It always tried to lure him in and entice him to enter it and own it. And of course, eventually when he comes back from the war, I think, he went to one of the wars. I know he served the military and everything else. He wanted to, he had the money to buy it, and he bought it. It was like faith. He was going back to Brownsville right when it came for sale. And the skeptic mentions in there, he talked to this family. He had a family. Didn't tell him or his wife it was haunted until they called afterwards when they were having their own incidents happening in the house. And the big thing with the basement was that's where a lot of these abortions from this Dr. M character were taking place. Because yeah, they had this psychic from the church that from wherever she was, he never met her. As far as I know in a book, he just knew afterwards. Her name was Connie Valente. She would have these visions and dreams about Bob's house, and she knew where all these terrible things had happened and why things were happening where, and it was very unexplainable. And there are other little things in there that reek of like a demonic infestation, such as it starts out small little things to make you notice it. A demon needs you to notice it to give it that attention to really flourish and really gain traction, power. And it would be little things like things that go missing, or something as small as in his coat closet, the light switch you would pull on the string to turn the light on would always be wrapped up around the light bulb. So much so that he would literally turn off the light, close the door, walk away, come back, and it would be, things like that, just to get that attention. So there was quite a bit of things in here that really, I don't know, I believe it. I'm just gonna go on a limb and say there wasn't much in there that I thought was full of shit or bullshit. So, with that being said, guys, the Demon of Brownsville Road, it's a really good book, and you'll be seeing it in movies here shortly. I imagine it's going to be out this coming year. I don't think it's been out unless it's named after something else. I don't know. Like, I usually keep track of my horror movies, and I don't know if this is out. I don't think it is. But with that being said, guys, that's gonna be it for this edition of Spooky Stories. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope you guys had a great Halloween. If you fell asleep, great. If this was used for background noise and it helped you relax, helped you study, helped you concentrate on something else, that's great too. Let me know how the whispering was and the background ambience of this beautiful forest. Beautiful haunted forest. So yeah, guys, with that being said, everyone have a good day, great night. If you had a good sleep, great. Stop by again soon, and again, like the video, hit the subscribe button, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.